We're going to start. We've got more than 25 people in the room, and I've always said if we get 25 in the room, we'll get started because I hate to have people waiting around with nothing to do, but it's only 6 minutes to the top of the hours we'd say in radio. Although I worked at radio stations where they said never, ever, ever do the to the top or bottom unless you're syndicated in more than one market. It's always better to say that it is, in fact, 12:55 where I am. Of course, I'm in several markets now because I'm in different time zones, but another story altogether. People have been checking in so far. I appreciate that greatly. Retired Butcher Boy from NorCal. Tigerman 99515 is in the room, as is Pete Nikolich. Checking in. Cold Lake Alta from Alberta, Canada. Mark Miller. Steve, sup? And Tigerman asks about the baseball bat. And yes, there is a baseball bat right there. That is a black Louisville Slugger someone sent in, and it says Steve Lehto and Lawyer Dog on the barrel, which is pretty cool. Greetings from Katy, Texas, from Jim Beam, and the Prodigal Strangers checking in as well. Scappoose, Oregon, Alan Brown Sr. Checking in. And, of course, I press one button and it jumps. No, the bat was not game used. The bat was sent to me as a memento. Cold Lake Alta, respecting Canadian Robot Lady. I believe she will be here. I chatted with her on Friday. It's always fun to talk to her, literally talk to her, because when she's speaking conversationally with me, usually I hear her voice every single day at the ends of my videos. And so it does even surprise me. Mark Miller says 94F here in the 303. And of course, my AC unit quit working on Thursday. Oh, it's a house of pain. Oh, Gene Ritchie from Chino Valley, Arizona. Rodney Middleton checking in. Hello, Steve. The Kingdom of Vinland. Hi. Iron Tanker squinting to find the hundo. The hundo is visible. I actually made a mental note this morning when shooting my morning video to put it someplace where it'd be visible also during the live stream. It is sitting on top of that bottle right there. I shouldn't tell you this, but it's kind of hard to see. But that bottle is a new addition to the set. It is not alcohol. It is honey. It is honey from the D, as in Detroit. And the Prodigal Stranger asks about the new bottle of booze, and that said, it's not booze, it's honey. It is literally honey. I went to a thing yesterday called the Lavender Fest. Lavender, of course, is a plant that they do all kinds of stuff with. It has an interesting aroma. You probably heard of lavender scented things. Lavender Fest is put on by some people who farm lavender over in a county. How do I describe this? Like north of Macomb County ways. A huge facility, and they had hundreds of vendors, and they had lavender tea and lavender lemonade and lavender donuts walking around in the boiling hot sun. It was crazy, but it was nice. And while one vendor was selling honey, and I liked the bottle so much, I bought it. The bottle is expensive, but it's full of honey, and the bees worked hard. So what can I tell you? Charles Layton, good morning from Leachville. Meredith Ward, hello, Steve. Todd Long from Normal, Illinois. We had a discussion last week about normal and how normal has different meanings in different places and contexts. Ronald Waitilko, checking in from Tupelo, Mississippi. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing Waitilko, but I've got Tupelo correct, I think. Bend Over is here. Roman just watched the video you posted. Yes. Oh, posted today. Yeah. I'm hoping that we can stay away and not become a cesspool of arguments over what happened yesterday, largely because although it is a very, very historical and important thing that happened yesterday and a very serious and ugly thing that happened yesterday, we don't have all the facts yet. And the facts as they develop continue to I've seen things that have already been changed 180 degrees, where they said one thing yesterday, this morning, like, no, I've seen things that have already been changed 180 degrees, where they said one thing yesterday, this morning, like, nope, it's this. And it's like, it's one of the most disappointing things about watching the news. And so I don't want to get into a huge fight here about anything like that, simply because we can't really discuss it without having the facts, and the facts aren't out yet. Bob Bong checking in from Niles, Michigan. Of course, over here down in the bottom right-hand corner, Niles, Michigan. I love that place. Steve Berwanger, I have honey whiskey from Pennsylvania. Yeah, they do have honey that use flavoring in some alcoholic drinks, but this is literally just pure honey. Tigerman99515 says, my copy of your Super book is not for sale. I have 3 copies, and that's it. And I keep thinking that what I need to do is talk to my publisher about putting it back out. They've said they don't want to because they don't think it's worth the investment because it's such an expensive book to produce. So I am looking into doing it myself. I might do that. We'll see. We'll see. Faye Woodward, MRC CCE, says Oregon here. DePaul 31 checking in from Staten Island, New York. Sunny and warm 85F. Hey, DePaul's a good friend of mine. He sent me a whole bunch of stuff, and I've met him. I met him last year at a Tucker event in Pennsylvania. He walked up and said, "Hi, Steve. I'm DePaul." Robert Hodgins, Steve, haven't seen you live for quite a while. I've missed you. Well, I appreciate that. I've been doing lives fairly regularly on Sundays at 1 o'clock, 1 till 3. I might one of these days jump on and do one at night just to see who's awake. I was watching somebody the other day who had over 1,000 people in the room, and it was on a weeknight. I'm like, wow, maybe I should try a weeknight because I can't get more than 800 in this room. It's 1 o'clock right now, so we'll see what happens. So Jake Lyon says, good morning from Wisconsin. I got my car keyed last night. Either they didn't like my bumper stickers or they confused me for someone else. That's a crying shame because there's nothing you can blame on the car. It's just so sad. And we've seen stories about people whose cars got keyed for whatever reason. And of course, it's a very, very expensive thing to have to repair, and it's a crying shame. So not a band account said, did you hear about the rally tragedy last night? Yes. And I mentioned a few minutes ago that we're going to try to not turn this into a huge discussion or debate about that. Tom writes, do you have a PDF for sale? I wouldn't, if I had one, I don't think I'd push it because the book has 450 high resolution photographs of wing cars, Chargers, the Daytonas, the Superbirds. And a PDF wouldn't do that justice or be a gigantic file, and so I'm working on trying to get it done. So Mark Miller says, I have a question. I'm thinking of selling my vehicle to my nephew. However, I don't want an ill will. I'm trying to be altruistic in the process. Are your thoughts? I did a video about don't sell a car to a relative. And the reason why is I've heard so many stories from somebody who got a car from somebody and they bought it and then it broke down. They're like, you sold me a piece of junk. And it's one thing if a total stranger accuses you of that, but do you really want to potentially cause bad blood? And I've heard stories before where somebody said, this kid was begging me to sell him the car. So I sold him the car. Now he's mad at me, and his mom's mad at me, and the family's mad at me, and they want me to take it back. They want me to repair his transmission for him. And it's like, so it's the risk you take. I mean, I actually know somebody who gave someone a car. Here, have it. It's free. And it broke down. They're like, well, are you going to fix it for me? Well, you can't give me a car without a warranty. That doesn't make any sense. So Mark and Indy says, greetings. Morgan Free says, I just got a Ford Explorer from a friend that needs a lot of work, but it has a huge gas tank. What year? I've had about 5 or 6 different Ford Explorers. I've got 2 right now. I've got a 2002 and a 2019. Mark Kell says, only Michiganders hold up their mitts to show you where they're from. It's so convenient. Yeah, it's more convenient on the Lower Peninsula, although you can go like this. From your perspective, that kind of works, right? But they say that Florida looks like a body part also, but it's kind of hard to point to that. So, 69 Coronet 500 is 92 degrees so far in Ocklawaha, Florida. Oh, wow. Todd Long says it's an 07. It's an 07. Cool. Very cool. I don't think I ever had one of those. Kingdom of Vinland, did you see my previous question about your turbine car book? No, I did not. Hang on. I might have a few copies of that. I might. One of my lights is blocking that. But I had a few of those. So if you're looking for one of those, let me know. I've got some hard copies. The only books of mine that are quote unquote out of print that we care about is the winged car book. I've got the Tucker book, the turbine car book. I've got the American Murder Houses, of course. So but if you're looking for the turbine car book, send me a note and I'll hook you up as long as I've got some. Brian W. Anyone keying a car is a jerk. I agree. Eddie Huff. Hey, Steve from Knoxville, Tennessee, dedicated watcher. I like Knoxville. I've been there a couple times. I went down to do an interview for a documentary about Bobby Isaac. And I was going to talk to them at the Hickory Motor Speedway. So I drove down from Michigan and spent the night in Knoxville and then got up the next morning and continued the trip did my interview and drove all the way home. I had Wolfie with me on that trip, believe it or not. Wolfie, the Shetland sheepdog I had for a few years there, just by himself because Milo had passed away a few years earlier. But he occasionally would go on road trips with me, keep me company. So Wolfie got to go to Knoxville also. Shrek PMC, hello. Matthew Shostrom says your main issue is that you do these when people realize they procrastinated too much already this weekend and need to actually get something done. That's funny. I was sitting here like 12:15 and I thought to myself, wow, it's so long until I do the live. And I'm like, wait, the live is at 1 o'clock. It's okay. I was thinking it was 2 o'clock for some odd reason. So I'm like, okay. Ray Donovan says, keep an eye on that Explorer transmission. I had so many Explorers. I've never had trouble with the transmission. Never. But again, I might be unusual. JR says, Steve, this is America. Since when do we need the actual facts to argue a topic? But seriously, everyone has their opinions on politics and religions. I appreciate that you don't go there. Oh, boy. Well, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I try so hard. To not do politics and not do religion. And I was thinking this morning going, something, I really would like to discuss the idea that an attempted assassination of a former president is actually treated differently than just a typical murder. And I think most people get that. They go, of course, it makes sense. And I go, but there's an actual law that got passed on that, and there's a reason for that. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about this, but not go into anything else. So I was actually debating this morning whether I could even do that video, but for fear, unfortunately, even if you avoid politics, there are people out there going, well, by the way you avoided it, you're saying something. It's like, no, I'm not. So, Stanley Wong, do you have any plans to sell autographed copies of your other books? I don't want to sit here look like I'm shilling for books. It's like bowling for dollars. But if you want an autographed copy of one of my books, if I have them in stock, and I have a bunch of 4 or 5 different ones in stock right now, if you want one, send me a note and I'll let you know if I've got it. And if I don't, I don't. But if I do, I'll hook you up. I'm happy to sign stuff. My autograph's getting uglier and uglier as time goes by. So I feel sorry for the people who do the autograph collecting for sports memorabilia. They've got a baseball that someone told them was signed by Ted Williams. It turns out that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of fake ones out there. And how do you know? I mean, and some people put a lot of money on that. So we'll see how that goes. Keith Gidry's checking in along with Bota Bob. I bought my first car for my uncle. It was a 1970 Chevy Nova. Paid $50 for it. Replaced the tranny and engine and never blamed him. That's the way to do it. I had one of my brothers had a Chevy Nova. I forgot what year it was. I know it was blue. Actually, several of my brothers had Novas, but one of them had a blue Chevy Nova. He put like a gazillion miles on it. And then he eventually gave it to another brother of mine who put another gazillion miles on it. And one day it was parked in front of the family house and everyone was gone to bed. And then, of course, the local bars let out. And there was a restaurant that served alcohol at the end of the street. And my brother told me, he goes, 2:15 in the morning, you hear all kinds of crazy stuff out there. And one night they heard a really loud bam. And my brother turns on the porch lights and looks out there, and his car is like bent in half up on the lawn as the car rammed into it. And the funny part was that he got a check from the insurance company because the car was legally parked and the other person's insurance had to pay for it. And he's like, I got a free car. And then I got this check. My other brother's like, well, wait. I gave it to you and you're keeping that money. It's another story altogether. So Paul Pipitone says, wow, your studio looks so different from this angle. I've thought about just on a lark, like moving this setup someplace else and getting that set from a different angle. Or green screening it and flipping it upside down. That'd be pretty cool too. I've never worked with a green screen though. I'm not sure how my hair would work out with a green screen. Tigerman99515 says, let's all take a second and like this. I appreciate that. We've got 150 likes by my count, 454 in the room. 454. It's a good number. It's a good engine number. Tom rates, just had my first child, going to get a Ford Explorer if I can't get a Hellcat Durango. Are you a married man, Tom? Does your wife want you to get a Hellcat Durango? Mind bend high, Steve. Oh. Robert Hodgins had a 74 Vega for 10 years and gave it to my niece who drove it for 4 more years. Wow. I had a Vega once too, and I didn't mind it. A lot of people had bad thoughts on Vegas, and I know that people were calling them, bad cars that had the old Iron Duke engine in it, which, by the way, if you didn't overheat it, it was a good engine. It had timing gears, for instance, and a couple other things. But there you go. Believe in Yourself points out it's not unusual by Tom Jones. That's not unusual. And Carrie Mache, although it could be Matchett, changed the chair to wood. Yay. Okay. And of course, referring to the chair back here, which has now been changed for over a month. But these live streams are so sporadic in that they're only once a week at best. I don't expect everyone to hit every single one of them. Juan Peralta, if a manufacturer is responsible for warranty during a warranty period, shouldn't they control how and when that warranty is given? There's no reason for consumer to self-repair under warranty. I think what you're saying is, in other words, if I own something and it's got a warranty on it and something breaks and I decide to fix it myself, I suspect you're asking, why wouldn't that void the warranty? It's not often that people are trying to fix it themselves. It's sometimes they're doing stuff that's pretty straightforward. But it depends. I mean, arguably, if the consumer damages or modifies the thing, then they can void the warranty. It's just they can't put a sticker on it. Go, if you remove this sticker, it voids the warranty. And so keep in mind that a lot of these things we talk about, hypotheticals, are usually at one end of the scale or the other. So, obviously, if you open it up and destroy the inside with a hammer, okay, they don't honor that warranty. But you removed the sticker, okay, that's not a reason. So what happens in the middle is the tricky part. So I'm getting a weird clicking in my headset, and I think it's coming off the microphone. So I don't know if it's actually come out of the air. I hope it's not. Derek Otto Matt Zeggs, I've been writing a book also. You actually said 2. I changed it to also in my head because it sounds better. Written, it doesn't matter, but spoken. Mart Kell, it's hard to win an argument against a smart person. It's impossible to win an argument against a stupid person. There's, of course, the old saying about, arguing with someone's really stupid and they can drag you down to their level and beat you there. So grubby old patriot on the road from Detroit to Cadillac and back. And Cadillac, of course, is kind of up here in the middle. It's a town you pass through if you're going up to Traverse City, say from parts south. But it's a very, very beautiful town. In fact, a couple years ago, I did an arbitration up there where I was the arbitrator. Both sides agreed to use me and let me rule. I didn't enjoy it, but I did it anyways. And I brought my metal detector with me. And they were tearing up sidewalks in town. So when we were finished for the day, I jumped in my car and went into town and I did some metal detecting. And I found a bunch of cool stuff, including some Indian head pennies. So that's always fun. Alan Brown Sr., I'm surprised the $100 bill is there. Did you use chewing gum to hold it there? Sometimes I have to balance it. And if I put it behind a license plate, I got to make sure the license plate is flush up against the wall. Once or twice I put it there and I forgot about it and it fell. And if it goes behind that bookcase, it can be kind of hard to get out, especially where I used to have it. Now it's easier to get behind because it's not a real wall. But in the old days, the bookcase is up against the wall, and the bookcase weighs like 1,000 pounds with all the books are in it. Not that much, I'm joking. And if something fell behind it, I couldn't. I'd have to stick like a hanger wire in there and drag it out. Oh. JR says, I saw the video you did this morning on my way to the office. I thought you did a good job keeping it on the legal aspect. Well, thank you very much. Of course, the question is, why are you going to the office on a Sunday? But I know some people do. Proud Liberal 24 says, what's the worst car out there? Audi, Kia, Hyundai? Thought you may know. Interestingly, there's no... You can buy a good car from any manufacturer. You get what you pay for. So you buy a bottom-end car, it's going to be like other bottom-end cars. I actually don't often get ones where it's like all these cars are bad. It's happened a few times, but not very often. More often than not, it's the high volume cars. So if there's some cars really, really popular and they make a lot of them, a bunch of them will turn out to be defective. I think it's just math. Once in a while, you hear about some really bad design idea. I've mentioned before, I did a video about the neon springs. The car is called a neon and the springs were in the transmission. It's not the springs were neon colored. And a friend of mine who is a spring expert told me, he goes, you're going to see a bunch of transmissions and neons going bad. Just trust me on that one. And there's a whole story behind it. It turns out he was right. And for a while, I had a ton of neons in the office with bad transmissions. Figuratively speaking, Nora Technology is my favorite lawyer. Thank you. Charles Layton says, yes, your writing is getting worse. I have 3 of your books, and the autograph has gotten worse as the books came along over the years. I assume you mean the handwriting, not the writing of the books themselves, but I understand. People say, what do you slow down? It doesn't matter. My hand just does. It's possessed. It's like a bad horror movie. Hey, Duncan Campbell's checking in from Australia. Hello, my friend. Good to hear from you. Mind Bend is in Southgate. And Dr. DR says, wow, fake set. My faith is destroyed. You see, my entire channel is performance art. I hope you understand that by now. And so I've been in a couple different locations with this camera. That's right there. Just trust me on that one. And I used to be in a studio, an actual studio that had that wooden wall behind me with the boards that go like this. And then I decided to move my studio here. And I, for about 2 weeks, had videos with nothing but this ceiling up here. And it didn't look right. And so I knew I had to do something. So I contacted a friend of mine, and I covered this in a video, I think, on the Vault channel. I have another channel called Steve Lehto Vault. Check that out. There's only 25,000 subs there, so it's still a secret. And I have a very good friend who does woodworking. He's a Michelangelo with wood. And I said, I got a really easy job for you. I go, I want you to replicate the wall that used to be behind me. And he broke out a tape measure, and he's measuring stuff and figured out what kind of wood it was. And turns out the wood planks are an unusual size. He had them cut and tongue and groove and all this, puts it together and brings it up here. And when I put it in place and put stuff back up, people were convinced I'd simply moved back to my old studio. And I didn't have to tell anybody. But I thought, eventually someone's going to figure it out, because you can still see a couple small gaps down here between this short bookcase and the tall bookcase. And if you look in that gap, you can see a space you can look through. And I suppose I could have covered that somehow, but I thought, I'm not going to put that much work into trying to pull one over on my viewers, because quite frankly, I don't care. The videos look how the videos look. And trust me, I'm not an interior decorator. Oh. Meredith Ward, have you ever visited Reno? Hot August Nights Classic Car Show in August? No, I have not. I've heard of it. I've never been to any car shows outside of Michigan that I'm aware of. Other than the one I did in Pennsylvania that the Tuckers were at, where there were 5 Tucker automobiles. Actually, there's 8 on display, and then I think they drove 4 of them around. But that was pretty cool. But yeah, there's big car shows all over. And I try to make it to them here in Michigan. I'll do the Woodward Dream Cruise on August 17th. And so I'll be there. I occasionally do the Cars and Coffee in Birmingham, Michigan, at Past Diners. And I've done the Cars and Coffee at the M1 Concourse a couple times. And it depends on the weather. If it's nice out, I'll bring the Cobra. If it's potentially going to rain, I'll take the Viper. If it is going to rain, I drive an Explorer. So Gordon Kilna checking in from Pensacola, Florida. DePaul says Howard Stern's book signings lasted 5 or 6 hours. He stayed until he signed everyone's book. A lot of people out there don't like Howard Stern. I actually like Howard Stern. Having worked in radio, you've got to respect what he did. But one of the funniest things of all is that he had 2 best-selling books. He may have had a third, by the way, because he did one on his interviews. But his first book was such a bestseller that if you did a book signing someplace, it would cause a commotion. The streets would be blocked off. Lines would be miles long. And he would tell people, I will stay here until every single book is signed. And he would sit there and just sign books for hours and hours and hours and hours. And he did that more than once. He did it a bunch of times, and he sold a ton of books. But he's all of his unusual aspects aside, he's a man of the people. And I've heard him say, if you came to a book signing to get a book signed by me and you bought my book, I will sign it. So I've never had that trouble at a book signing, but be a nice problem to have. Mike King says, what do you think about the possible surge of cheap Chinese electric vehicles flooding the U.S.? On a hypothetical basis, that is actually a scary concept because don't forget that we had electronics flooding the American market that put American like television companies that made televisions out of business, or at least got them out of that business. But the real question is, if you're going to build a car for the American market, you're going to have to bring it up to certain standards. And I don't know if any Chinese car companies have done that yet, or how close they are to getting that done. So it might take a while. Gilbert says, which car are you taking to Woodward Dream Cruise? It depends on the weather. Depends on the weather. So Tigerman99515 says, any car will go a million miles, just keep fixing it. Yeah, and of course, there's some cars more durable than others. The number one thing you can do to increase the longevity of a car, and I'm going to get some argument on this, but I think most people agree, is regular oil changes. Just keep changing the oil. And I've met people who are like, oh, I check it, but no, my oil light hasn't come on yet. Just keep changing the oil. Number one. Number two is pay attention to everything. And as soon as something acts up, get it taken care of. So if you hear some grinding noise from the brakes, go in and get the brakes done. Grinding noise from your hubs, go get your wheel bearings looked at. And that kind of stuff. And so there are stories about people who get these, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles out of cars. And everyone I've heard of always said, oh, guess what? I change the oil regularly. I stay on top of everything. And we're quite happy with that. So Taco Cat would say, wants to know if you could represent me on my 1990 Cadillac Alante. I think it's a lemon. It's a bit old, my friend. In fact, it is so old, I wasn't even a lawyer when it was built, unless it was built in 91, but I don't think it'd be possible. So yeah, but hey, if you still got it, it runs. I got to put that in your pipe and smoke it, says Eugenia Vasquez. Eugenio, sorry. Put that in your pipe and smoke. It was also something John DeRemus said at the end of every show. And he had a syndicated show that we used to play in Bad Axe when I was on the radio on WLEW, AM and FM. And the FM was beautiful music. And for 1 hour, I believe it was from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, we played the John DeRemus show on both stations so that the disc jockey who was in the building, probably by himself, could go and program the automation for the next day and take care of all the tasks and chores he had to take care of to make sure the station was ready to go online the following morning with a DJ showing up and stuff. And so I remember hearing John DeRemus, had a great voice, by the way, and an interesting show. He would play music. It was largely beautiful music. It was aimed at a much, much older audience. But he had things where he'd do like on a theme, a bunch of songs on a theme, or tell little stories. But at the very end, he'd tell a story and go, put that in your pipe and smoke it. Oh. Ember Mist 69 says, seen today's video. Good job keeping it focused. I do wonder if it's possible to talk about the one Supreme Court ruling. I know Eagle did, but I didn't finish the video because he's getting a little political. Are you talking about the one where they ruled about presidential immunity? I will. That's one, and the other one, the one about the homeless encampments, I will cover those. But I want to read the opinions very, very carefully and then put some real thought, because they're very, very important. But also with the presidential immunity, I've had people on both sides send me impassioned emails explaining why I need to do this story because that opinion is so wrong. And if both sides are saying it's wrong, okay, either it's perfect or one of these sides is wrong. But I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to get into who's right or wrong. I'm simply going to say, here's what the opinion is and here's what it means. And so we'll take a look at that. So Jerry Lass says, I feel like I got called in on my day off. I'm a stay-at-home dad, wife's day off. She took my daughter and left me with a toddler who's going nuts. She should be dealing with this. Right now, she's someplace else going, my ears are burning. I suspect he knows what I go through 6 days a week. Maybe he'll understand. So I appreciate that. Has the Canadian robot lady checked in? I think I just saw a reference to her somewhere in here. Yes, yes. And by the way, and she'll tell you all about it. She recently painted her car with a roller. And she told me she's going to do it. And she goes, Steve, I saw this video about how you can paint your car with a roller and it comes out. I mean, what are you talking about? How could that come out well? That's like saying, like, like Van Gogh painted something with a roller. Like, what? She goes, no, it can be done. And she sent me photographs of the work in progress and it looked impressive. So I think she managed to pull it off. So yeah, the Canadian robot lady has some interesting hobbies, shall we say. Morgan Freese's oil change at most every 5,000 miles. I agree with that. I also go full synthetic. And I know that some people say, oh, you're wasting your money. Yeah. But again, I also get these engines that just run and run and run and run. So we'll go for that. Stanley Snow Monkey 318 says those lights are called idiot lights for a reason. You know, the saddest part of all is that they have an oil light on cars. Now, I understand that some cars now have oil level sensors, but in the old days, of course, there's the light that's just the oil can, right? It's the oil can. And the oil can light comes on, and I've had people pull into the gas station when I worked there, and they go, "Oh, hey, Steve, I'm low on oil." They go, "Oh, did you check it?" No, my light came on, and I'm like, "Oh." And you pull the dipstick, and it's smoking, and it's black. I don't know how much oil you need because your stick is dry. What do you mean? That's oil pressure, not oil level. What? And it's sad because that was probably the most misunderstood idiot light of all. People understand a temperature gauge indicates that something's getting too hot. I don't know. But the difference between volume and pressure, I think asked to explain what oil pressure is, most people would go like, oh, I don't know. Pressure of the oil? Drew Preston, Steve, I'm new to your channel. Do you have any favorite videos or topics I should search for? I only laugh because my audience always gets them for me. But if you want to join the fun, email me at steve@lehtoselaw.com. Whenever you see a story someplace that involves, there's a couple of different fun topics. People ripping other people off will get caught. Police officers getting in trouble, judges getting in trouble, lawyers getting in trouble, homeowners associations doing crazy stuff, or Hertz rental cars getting in the news. Somehow Hertz. And I do cover other topics like, RVs, but it's hard to come up with a new topic on the RVs, recreational vehicles. But occasionally they do pop up in the news. And interesting court rulings are always fun. I've got a couple of guys. There's a friend of mine who's a lawyer down towards Tennessee or the Carolinas, who, because he's a lawyer, has access to these different lawyers' weekly type newspapers that put up opinions. And he'll send me a thing and go, Steve, a local court just made a crazy ruling. Here's a copy of the judgment, or here's a copy of the court order. And those things don't make national news necessarily because it's a local ruling in a local court. But he'll send it to me. Oh my gosh, that's good. I don't care. I mean, I'll point out in the video, by the way, this is not binding law in any other state. It's not even binding law in that state. It's binding law in that circuit court, maybe, or maybe in that courtroom. But it's such a fascinating idea when a judge rules some way that is so unexpected. In fact, I put it over there. It's on my desk. I'm going to do a video about the ruling involving homemade alcohol in Texas, because that's a strange one. But I had a bunch of people send me that. So if you find it interesting, send it my way. Don't try to guess what I find interesting because you may or may not be right. But if you find it interesting, send it. Don't send me links to videos because I'll get a link to a video that goes, Steve, watch this. And in the old days, I'd watch it and go, why am I watching this? Oh, that's a video I put up. Or that's a video my nephew put up. And then people will send me a video and they'll go, Steve, watch this video. And I go, why? It's a story idea. Well, it's easier if you tell me what the story idea is, especially if it's like a link to an article. Because if you watch my channel, you'll know I don't do commentary videos about other videos. Generally speaking, you're not going to find a video where in the corner over here is another video or me talking about another video. It's not what I do. So find an article. So if you find a video about something, find the article that addresses it. Get me the link because I can glance at the headline and see what it's about. Because there have been days I've gotten 50 or 60 emails all about the same story. And I can tell them by looking into the subject line or the first sentence of the body of the text. So Mike Bennett, my dad always traded his car in every 3 years. My father was the same way. He did that where every couple years, I think it was either 3 or 5, he would go and trade in his car and he'd plan for it. So like, a year before that, he'd start thinking like, what's my next car going to be? So Larry, says, I saw what happened to President Reagan in 81 as a high school freshman. In 87, I had the honor as a Marine to be assigned to Reagan's protection detail in the UK. Very cool. And of course, I remember I was working at the gas station and I went into work and I punched in and a guy I work with goes, "Hey, Steve, did you hear the president got shot?" And I go, "What?" Because I was listening to radio, but I wasn't listening to the news radio. And the stations I was listening to, like WABX or WLLZ, hadn't exactly jumped on to say that Reagan was shot because he survived. And I remember hearing about it and going, "Oh wow!" And then of course we heard all the crazy stuff that came after. And I recently, not recently, but I've read more than once a book by a guy who was in the Secret Service, and he tells the stories of stuff that they had to do. Because keep in mind, the Secret Service not only is the bodyguard of the president, but they do all kinds of other stuff also, including guard ex-presidents and so on, and guard the White House and whatnot. And he told some stories about that. And at one point in time, he got assigned to protecting Richard Nixon while Richard Nixon was living out his final years in pretty much obscurity. He says the most boring job he's ever had because he just sat there. Nixon apparently didn't leave the house a whole lot. And so he's just sitting around protecting this guy. So kind of a crazy thing, but not every job can be full tilt excitement 24 hours a day. DX Gypsy, can you talk a bit about how circuit judges have the power to stop or put injunctions on federal laws? Well, that's one of those issues that came up, especially in the thing I just talked about with the alcohol in Texas, is that a federal court has the ability to issue an injunction to stop a law. And then, of course, the government has the right to appeal that and take it up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it would eventually get decided by the U.S. Supreme Court as to whether or not an injunction should issue, and if so, stay in place. If the Supreme Court says, yes, that law is unlawful, that law must be, stricken, then Congress can go back to the drawing board and redraft the law. And hopefully the Supreme Court will explain why and say, by the way, this is a problem. Here's why. And so the drafters next time can go around and figure it out. MH08 says, everybody subscribe to the Canadian Robot Lady channel. Yes, she has a channel. And she's putting up content. So the Canadian Robot Lady channel on YouTube. Mark Kell says, the problem with this world is smart people are full of doubts and the dumb ones are full of certainty. Oh, boy. Whiskey Mail says you should do a video about SXS side-by-sides being street legal in Florida using Montana side-by-side street legal plates under Florida's 316.2074 Special Session C number 5, except as otherwise permitted. Yeah, and I wonder if they'll close that loophole somehow. But it's always interesting because some of the people, as you may know, who get those Montana plates are actually residents of other states. And I know all about that, and I don't want to get into that fight right now. Oh. Proud Liberal 24 says, we read a lot of interesting cases in law school, such as a prisoner who escaped prison, and during time on the run, the prison personnel gave away his stuff, and after he caught, he sued the prison to get his stuff back. Did he win? I have a feeling he wouldn't win that, but I could be wrong. My favorite case, I wish I knew the name of it, was we were talking about torts, which is just suing somebody for a civil case where somebody wronged you, and a guy was trying to file a lawsuit where he had been water skiing barefoot, and he turned around and was water skiing backwards, barefoot, and he ran into something where he hit a low hanging, I think it was a branch, with his head, and he wanted to sue the guy driving the boat, saying the guy driving the boat was negligent in allowing that branch to hit him in the head. And it's like, but wait, let me get this straight. You were water skiing barefoot and backwards. Didn't you realize that your eyes were pointing this way, but you're going that way? You didn't know that? And the funny part is, I'm joking when I say who won that case, because quite often it doesn't even matter. As an attorney, they teach you to spot the issues and raise the issues and then analyze the issues. And the correct answer sometimes is like, well, it depends what the judge does or the jury does. But, will it get to a jury? Yes. Or will it get to a jury? No. Fernando Rodriguez asks, has a class action lawsuit ever been filed versus Hertz for people arrested for reported stolen cars? I thought there was one. I could be wrong, though. I thought there was. I know there have been lawsuits. I just don't know about a class action. The question always is, are there enough people where class action makes sense? And it depends on whether you're state or federal. But usually it's, are there enough cases where it makes more sense to try them as a class than individually? But I don't know off the top of my head. Dave Rogers says the tiny Secret Service lady was trying to guard 6'3" Trump. I noticed that too. And I also had a lot of people point out, like, oh my gosh, one of those Secret Service people is a woman. She had her hair up, so she kind of blended in at first. And once it was called out, you recognized it. But yeah, that's the thing, and they always wear the sunglasses too. So, they look like this, but then you're looking over there, you wouldn't know. So. Oh, DePaul says, I heard an interview with Reagan's son, Michael. He said his father was much more seriously injured than was reported, and he's lucky to be alive. Absolutely. That's something that came out later. And I have mixed feelings about Reagan's legacy. However, I will give that guy a ton of credit for a couple things, one of which is that he was very seriously injured, and they took him to the hospital. They took care of him, and he played it off kind of like, no big deal. I got shot. I'm fine now. And it was a big deal. It was. But number two, they've been showing the footage of him where he's speaking not long after that, and a balloon pops. And without flinching, he goes, you missed me. Guy had a sense of humor. Come on. Mike Bennett, the Haynes manual was based on a complete breakdown and rebuild of the vehicle. I love those manuals. I also like them. It was at Chilton's and also Motors. There's a couple different manuals you could buy. Some of them are very, very helpful. Like, you'd be looking at something in an engine compartment going, okay, I need to get to that. How do I get there? And you realize that you've got to like remove some belts and maybe swing the alternator out of the way, and then you can get to it. Or the manual says, oh no, you can do it this way, and explain an easier way to do it. And once in a while, though, you'd find when it goes, how to remove the engine. 1, shut car off. 2, raise hood. 3, disconnect battery. 4, remove engine. It's like, okay, I think we're missing a few steps. Oh boy. Henry Andrade says, hello, Steve. What do you think about Alec Baldwin's prosecutor? I know very little about the case. I might do a story on that. I'm gonna explain something really quickly here. And that is, it's touchy to do videos on YouTube that mention weapons. And I know people who say, Steve, don't be a wimp. Just talk about it and let YouTube deal with it. Well, number one, the videos get demonetized. And don't get me wrong, I've put up videos before that got demonetized. I don't care. But the problem is, if you put up a video that YouTube doesn't like, they won't promote it, which means that a lot of people won't see it. So what's the purpose of making a video if you know it's not going to get seen? So I'd rather try to put up videos that are going to get seen than videos that won't be seen. So the problem with the Alec Baldwin case, obviously, is talking about what happened. And we all know what happened. And the prosecutors appear to have screwed up really badly in that case. And I am a skeptic at heart. And when prosecutors forget to turn over evidence to the defense, it's amazing how often that evidence was what we call exculpatory, i.e., it would have helped them. They never forget to turn over the useless stuff. It's the useful stuff that they forget to turn over. So I'm very skeptical of those claims. But Alec Baldwin's case was dismissed on a Brady violation because it became very, very painfully clear that there was evidence that would have helped Alec Baldwin's case that was withheld from his team. And it got to the point where they were so close to trial, the judge goes, we can't allow this sort of thing to happen, and just dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning that they can't retry him for this. And so, a Brady violation. But with respect to like what happened yesterday with Trump, same thing. But I mean, I can talk about the legalities of that very, very easily. So Melissa Thompson says, much love from Minnesota, Mr. Lehto. Chris Giorgi says, to remove engine, support engine on crane, remove car from below. Interestingly, I'm glad you said that. So my brother is helping Jay Leno get his turbine car back on the road. And you can remove the engine from that car two different ways. The average person would go, oh, you pop the hood and lift it out. Except that, of course, there's a transmission behind it, and it's kind of oddly shaped. And believe it or not, Chrysler would always elevate the car and drop it out the bottom. And you've got to drop off some of the front of the, stuff that goes out the tires and wheels and stuff. But it's easier to drop it in and drop it out that way. And so it's funny that you point that out. Dave Beeler, how does a judge determine with or without prejudice? When you hear about a case being dismissed without prejudice, it means it can be refiled at least once, depending on what type of case it is. So if you file a lawsuit against somebody, for instance, and you never serve them with it, the court can call you in and say, how come you never served them? And you say, well, I couldn't find them. Judge goes, okay, the summons has expired. I'm dismissing the case without prejudice. So you can refile it, but you better be able to go out and serve them. And so there's certain situations where it's quite obvious that the court can dismiss it without prejudice because, and there's court rules that say this, but criminal cases are very different because it's not uncommon that they think they've got a case against somebody. But usually the bar to being re-prosecuted is the fact that you were found not guilty the first time and they can't double jeopardy try you again. So, but I suspect that there's case law on it that says if a Brady violation happens so late that it severely prejudices the defense's ability to defend the case, then it has to be dismissed with prejudice. So, okay, I don't know if it jumped on me again or not. So we'll slide down here. Jail admin says you wear a turban. A turban is different. I don't know why people think that. What you really should do is go check out a dictionary. A dictionary is your friend, my friend. And look up the word turbine, and you'll see it has two pronunciations: turbine or turbine. Turbine. And a turbine is not different unless you choose to pronounce it that way. I'm not wrong on this, as I like to say. But if you say, no, of course, I-N-E is pronounced bine, well, then it'd be turbine engine, wouldn't it? It's not engine. It's engine. Engine would be something you drink, some kind of gin, right? Engine, right? And I did an entire video on that once where I pointed out that all the Chrysler advertisements back in the 60s had a very deep voice guy going, introducing Chrysler's turbine car. Here, the turbine car does this. The turbine car does that. They never called it a turbine car. And they never wore it on their heads either. So thank you. Oh, boy. MHOA, Denver 94, the heat index of 89. Really? Huh. Bill DeLacy asks about the So Help You God. And any court today will let you swear to tell the truth or promise to tell the truth or affirm to tell the truth. They've gotten all around that. I've had some people go, Steve, I just go into court and say, I'm an atheist. You can't make me do that. You go, okay, fine. You promise to tell the truth. Oh, I can't promise either. It's against my religion. Old Jarhead says engines and motors are not the same. You know, that's interesting statement. Although of course, through common usage, we have boat motors. For some odd reason, we've been calling them boat motors for the longest time. And so, you know, and of course, I think a calculator called the difference engine. But generally speaking, uh, you got your gasoline engines and your electric motors. Like I said, until you have a boat motor, in which case, that's considered acceptable. John Zabelak says, is it tire or tire? Of course, asking, is it I or Y? And of course, it depends on where you are. If you call that thing that you look in a closet with when the lights are out a torch that you found in the boot of your car, I think you might spell it with a Y. I could be wrong, though. Mark Sparks, I watched Double Jeopardy for legal advice. I think it was Lionel Hutz who said that he watched Matlock the other night and thinks he got the gist of it. How do you pronounce vitamin? Is there another way? Vitamine? Vita yours? I don't know. Code Meester Beats says, I live in the Appalachian Mountains and I readily accept that language varies wildly from place to place. Yeah, I often say that laws vary wildly from state to state. I routinely get these calls, and someone will go, hey, Steve, I'm calling you from Idaho. I've got a question regarding Social Security benefits. And I say, number one, I'm not licensed in Idaho, so I can't help you. Number two, I'm not a specialist in Social Security benefits. Okay, well, let's pretend I'm in Michigan. Okay, we can't do that anymore because I know you're in Idaho. I'm really bad at pretending. But number two, I don't know the answer. If you were in Michigan, I don't do Social Security benefits law. I mean, I'm an expert in lemon law, Magmoss Warranty Act, that kind of thing. I no, and I get these, and I have a thing at the end of every video, a disclaimer. It says this is not legal advice, and it goes, I do not practice law outside the state of Michigan, and I still get tons of emails from other states, and I have to say I can't help you. I'm sorry. And the sad part is I get people who are mad at me about it. And I'm like, why? Canita Rebel Lady says it's vitamin. I suppose. I've never heard that, though. Is that a regional thing? I remember there's a Benny Hill joke about vitamin and hormone, but I can't do this. This show is rated PG. David Fuller says engine or motor, you look it up, but one is more specific than the other, but there's a lot of overlap. And the overlap is acceptable. So no one's going to question you for saying, I got a boat motor, right? My boat motor. It's a Honda 5-horse boat motor. And you could say it's a 5-horsepower engine, and people go, oh, it's what type of engine? For a boat. Oh, it's a boat motor. You also hear the phrase motorboat. You don't hear the phrase engine boat. But these are the kinds of things that if I'm writing something for a technical audience, I'll be very, very careful about. If I'm just shooting the breeze with my friends, I blew the motor of my car. Everyone knows what that means. You lunched it, right? Threw a rod. Oh. Johnny Quest says Black's Law Dictionary is not the correct resource for the explanation of turbine. Not even the second edition? Come on. MH08, I can't pronounce aluminum like the Brits. Aluminium. But yeah. I think they have an extra letter in it, don't they? I think. Code Meester Beats is in the foothills. People's language varies quite a bit. The word shower can rhyme with tire. Shower. Shower. Becomes more of a single syllable, just kind of like thing. MD Hofstede's checking from Grand Rapids, home of WKLQ, WGRD, and WLAV. And LAV is the album rock station, right? They've been around for like a trillion years. Um, John Zablak says nobody calls a locomotive engine a motor. Okay, okay, I got that. I think what you need to do, John, is put together a Venn diagram of all these different motors and engines and things, and we'll whiteboard it later. Okay. Sad Tiger says hello all. I'm late. You know something? You're still earlier than the people who won't show up at all. I've run the Free Press Marathon, I think 13 times, 14 times. And I never said I ran it fast. Okay. And so I'd be running the race, and my goal is just simply to finish, right? I don't care as long as I finish. And so sometime around mile 20, 21, 22, you're you're jogging along. You're physically destroyed, but you can see the finish line, so to speak. And it ain't that far off. And you realize you're closer to that than you were to the start. So you're good. And somebody will come along, or you'll pass somebody or whatever, and you're running along. And I've had someone turn to me and say, I feel like such a loser. And I go, you realize that you and I beat everyone who didn't show up today. And so there are thousands of people in the marathon. There's hundreds of people in America, hundreds of millions of people in America who didn't run it. We beat all of them. That's how I look at it. David Bowden says, or it could be Bowden, says, and I made it jump. You've obviously been around cars for years. It strikes me as an old school gearhead. It makes me wonder just how much mechanical aptitude you have, as in, were you a mechanic? Not quite. I never got certified or licensed or anything like that. But I worked in a gas station for a couple of years. I towed cars for a long time. And I can tell you that on my own cars, when I had the time and I had the money and I had the tools and the wherewithal, I would do my own oil changes. I replaced water pumps, intake manifolds, valve covered gaskets, radiators, all of the easy stuff. Okay. I've never rebuilt an engine on a bench, for instance. I've watched other people do it. But I probably couldn't do that with if I had to. But I also know enough about cars where I understand it. If someone's explaining to me what happened to my car and they say, okay, here's what happened to your car. I know they're telling me the truth or not. And but yeah. No, and I've learned a lot by reading about the cars. So obviously writing books about the Chrysler Turbine car, Dodge Daytona, Plymouth Superbird, or the Tucker 48, which is not a torpedo, but a Tucker 48. I learned a lot about cars that way also. But I will also admit to you that I no longer work on my own cars. Number one, because it's easier for me to just pay someone else to do it, and it gets done right. And I know a couple of good mechanics, and so I'd rather have them work on my stuff. But I just life's too short, and I've got other things to do besides work on my cars. I'd rather drive them than work on them. So there you go. Now, Johnny Knoxville checked in. It says, tip the number one YouTube bartender, Steve Lehto, and his fresh cut lettuce, with which we'll make Lehto slaw. I was giving my email address to somebody the other day, and the guy goes, Lehtos, Law, Lehto slaw? And I go, yeah, that's it. Dave Beeler says, if you take your vehicle in for a recall and they screw up your car that's out of warranty, does the dealer fix it on them? Example with a Toyota FJ fuel pump recall and the gas gauge doesn't work after the recall. I would think they're supposed to. I know they have to do the quote unquote repair free of charge to you, which I would assume means that they can't damage your car in the process unless there's something about the old gas tank that hurt your gas gauge. But I've only heard of that happening once or twice. It's usually they bring the car in on a recall, do the work, and then they get in an accident with the car or something. Mike B, is lemon law popular? I haven't heard of any friends or family that have had a problem with a vehicle. And Mike is from Rochelle, Illinois. Rochelle. And it's popular enough that it's the specialty of my law practice and has been for 30 years. But not everyone who buys cars will buy a lemon. But if you think about it, if one out of 1,000 cars is a lemon, how many cars do they build? But if it wasn't popular, I'd be practicing another kind of law. So there you go. Ed G says, I like when you go to the parts store for wipers. They ask you for the engine size, front wheel drive, or all wheel drive, etc. And what's weird is I've seen some of those where it's ridiculous, but it's like Radio Shack asking you for your zip code to buy batteries. But that's an old joke. But there are times when you'd think it wouldn't matter, but it does. So, like for instance, I know that in one of my old Ford Explorers, it was a Ford Explorer Sport Edition, and the air filter was different in the Sport Edition than it was in the non-Sport Edition, with the same engine configured. Everything was the same. And I remember, I don't know why, I don't remember if it was larger or smaller, but I remember going into an AutoZone or something and saying, hey, I need an air filter. And the guy goes, what do you got? I tell him, hands it to me, and I go out in the parking lot. It's the wrong size. So now I take my old one in and I go, dude, it's the wrong size. And he's looking at it and he goes, oh, is yours an Explorer Sport? And I said, yes. He goes, okay, boom, there you go. It's a different air filter. But I can also tell you that I had one Ford Explorer that apparently came out the year that they switched over to the transmissions with no dipstick. And I'd go into an oil change place to get my oil changed, and they wouldn't check the transmission fluid. And I said, you check the trans fluid? They go, we can't. It's a sealed transmission. And I go, there's a dipstick right there. And I had a guy looking at it going, that's not your trans fluid. I go, then what's this one over here? And he goes, that's your oil. I go, then what's this one right here? And he goes, well, the computer says you haven't got one. And I said, but I obviously do have one. And then they would check it, and then they feel stupid. I talked to people who just said, they must have had a batch of engines. They're identical to the next year's engine, except that no dipstick or transmissions. So what are you going to do? Chuck Puck, Mike Bennett, he seems to know his stuff. Maybe they don't like his hatred of EV cars. Who hates our EV cars? Daniel Kester, hey, Steve, it's good to see you staying hydrated. Thank you, Daniel. Daniel's always checking in on my health, and I appreciate that. Daniel's a good friend of mine. One of the old school guys, been around here for a long time. Old Jarhead said, it's as if all new makers are making junk. That's the one thing that, and I know that I sound like I'm the old man shaking his fist at a cloud, but it really seems to be true that they are simply making the cars more complicated and cutting corners everywhere they can. There's some things that they cannot, cut corners on. Like they gotta have, the right kind of airbags and stuff. So there you go. But, I'm convinced that the car companies all need to be thinking longer term. And the problem is that corporate America wants short-term results. We want to increase over last quarter. It's like, guys, when the accountants ran General Motors for the first time in a big way, they ran it to the ground. You got to get away from that. Starting a GoFundMe to buy you a new office chair, says Alert One Systems. I actually like my office chair. This is an office chair I've had for a while. Very, very comfortable. If you're referring to the chair that's on the set, I put that there over complaints I had because I was using a folding chair, which was just as comfortable as that chair, but for some odd reason, it bothered people. I don't normally cave into peer pressure, but sometimes I do. So, Chuck Puck says Scotty Kilmer hates EV cars. I was asking if you watched him. I don't. I know a lot of people do. He's got a very, very popular channel. But I am not I've not watched many of his videos. I know from watching his thumbnails that he claims that several cars are the worst cars ever built, and they're not the same car. And so it's kind of like, how often can you say that before you can be, the boy who cried, bad car. Oh boy. Four running away says, I like shouting at clouds in Virginia. Oh, you can shout at them. You can shake your fist at them. It's just unfortunate you get labeled a Grandpa Simpson. Brian W., I work on my old car, saved tons of money. On Dooley's is simply more complicated. Modern cars. You know, that's one of the things I've had people ask me. They go, Steve, explain to me how the fact that we have all this decades and decades and decades of car building experience here, that they can't build a car that's defect free or relatively defect free. And I say it's because the cars have gotten more complicated. And so you've got engine control modules and body control modules and transmission control modules and sensors and this and that and everything. And if you understood how complicated the engines have become in a laboratory setting, the horsepower they can get out of a small space has gone way up and the emissions have dropped way down. But the second something goes out of whack, bad things happen, especially if these computers are supposed to talk to each other and two of them go bad at the same time. All bets are off. All bets are off. So somebody points out the CAFE laws, which of course is the fuel mileage standards. Lee Kincaid says people think they can't afford an attorney. Lemon law attorneys take these cases all the time because they get their money from the manufacturer, and they'll put that in writing. Michael Galak says, do you do lemon law exclusively for cars, or do you do appliances as well? Just cars. I don't know many attorneys who like to do other things because the lemon laws in Michigan, for instance, do not cover RVs, boats, jet skis, side-by-sides, ATVs, motorcycles, or any of those things. But they also don't cover specifically things like refrigerators or appliances. But the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act covers all of those things. But the real problem, and this is counterintuitive till you think about it, is that as a lemon law lawyer, I spent all my time suing the same defendants over and over and over again. But if somebody came into my office and they said, well, I've got this, Osterizer brand thing, I haven't sued Osterizer. If I have, it's been a long, long time. And every time I file a new lawsuit, there's a learning curve, not just for me, but for the other side. And so I've actually filed a lawsuit before against a manufacturer that was based in another country, but they sold things here with an American warranty. And they hired a local attorney who didn't know the law. And they apparently had to run everything by corporate counsel in the other country. And it became a nightmare. And it was such an obvious case that needed settlement. And the case eventually settled exactly the way it could have settled with my filing of my lawsuit. But it was just a nightmare. And so, I'd rather just stick with the cases that are easier to handle and get these great results for people than dabbling in other stuff. And it's just not worth it. Dirk Rameswinkel, do you have any books that is signed by the author? If so, who is the most prominent author that signed it? Which book? I've got a few. I've had a few people send me books signed by authors. But believe it or not, the only ones I've got that I show people is that both of my books that have forwards by Jay Leno are signed by Jay Leno. I've got one of my Turban Car books signed by him, and I got my one of my Tucker books signed by him because he wrote the forwards to both books. So the Jay Leno autographs are what I show people. Cold Lake Alta says, my brother runs an auto shop. He says he's more a computer technician than a mechanic. That's the thing. My uncle, I had an uncle. He's passed away now. Really, really cool guy. He was a transmission mechanic for his entire life. He worked in a transmission shop in Detroit. And as a hobby, he raced in USAC, stock cars in the late 50s, early 60s, into about 68 or 69, I think is when he quit racing. But he was an independent, so he didn't have any money other than out of his own pocket. Didn't have much of a crew but volunteers, but he raced. It was a lot of fun. I always liked talking to my uncle. And he was the kind of guy who could walk out and hear a car running and go, I can tell you what's wrong with it. And I'm talking about for all kinds of crazy stuff. So one time I had a brother who had a Buick LeSabre. One day he went up to fire it up and started making this awful racket. He shuts it down. He's like, oh my gosh, that's not good. And all of us who heard it were like, what was that? When you hear metal on metal clanging in a car, it's usually pretty bad. So we're sitting around talking about it, and somebody goes, hey, we need to get Uncle Leslie to come over and take a look at that so he can diagnose it. So my brother calls up my uncle and says, hey, any chance you can come over here and take a look at my car? And my uncle goes, why? And Tim goes, it's making this awful racket when I fire it up. And my brother's talking on one of those, early mobile phones, it hangs on the wall, but it's not connected to the wall. We called it the Telewalkie. And my uncle goes, any chance he can stick the phone out the window? And Tim goes, well, I can walk out there. And he's, do that. He was fired up. So my brother holds the phone like this, fires the car up, shuts it off. My uncle goes, yeah, it's a broken flywheel. My brother goes, what? He goes, yeah, you broke your flywheel. Isn't that weird? You broke your flywheel. Turns out it was a broken flywheel. It's diagnosing cars by phone. So those are the good old days. Yeah, Johnny Knoxville says that the Louisville Slugger's there in case any viewers get out of hand. We need a bouncer. Glittery Trinkets is just here to see what t-shirt it is today. Well, I'm always wearing these shirts on camera. And it's an Eddie Bauer shirt. I love these shirts. It's a cross between a cotton t-shirt and those tech shirts they give you for running. They're just very, very comfortable. I got like 20 of them in different colors. I got every single shade you can get them in. I was at the mall the other day and I saw Eddie Bauer shirt and I walked in and I'm like, oh, I've got all these. And I was wearing one at the time. Oh, boy. A. Smith said I had a late year 62 Catalina. I had many 63 parts. And that's exactly what I'm getting at. You wouldn't expect them to throw the parts away if they still fit, Oh, David Fuller says the Canadian Robot Lady now has more subscribers than I do. How many subscribers has she got? Let's take a look. Hang on a second. For those of you who don't know, right now we're pushing the Canadian Robot Ladies. Canadian. You'd think my phone would autofill that. There it goes. She's got 38 subscribers. Keep on rocking. Keep on rocking. So, yeah, and she'll have some video of her taking a paint roller to her car. Oh, boy. William Kelly says your uncle was a skilled craftsman. He was. And he was the kind of guy who would think nothing of, oh, your car's not acting right? Hang on, pop the hood. Let me climb underneath it. Didn't care what he's wearing. He's going to, oh, I can fix. Hang on a second. So, Joshua Gibson, I appreciate you, Steve. I got to step out, though. Take care. Take care, my friend. Thank you for checking in. I appreciate that. Old Jarhead says, now I'm retired. I only wear sweatpants. Okay, I'm not at the stage yet where it's sweatpants all the time or Dr. Sweatpants. What do they call the guy on Big Bang Theory? Was it Dr. Sweatpants? Captain Sweatpants, I think it was. But I wear shorts a lot, but I wear these shirts a lot. And it's just a matter of they're comfortable. I like them, and there you go. So, Victor J says you've got more t-shirts in a thrift store. Oh, you have no idea. I've got thousands of t-shirts now. One of these years, I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm literally going to take all my t-shirts, break them out, and line them up, and literally do a different shirt every single day until I'm done. It might take a couple years. John Nowak Jr. says, hey, checking in from Corpus Christi, Texas. Jason Benoit. Hello, Steve. Hope you're doing okay today. Earthbound Misfit, Cyberdoc. I know, right? Always true. Cyberdocs' CRL now has 41 subs. Hey, everyone counts. Everything counts in large amounts. Jacob Randell says, I wanted to thank you for bringing the Institute for Justice to my attention and donating to them. They do the stuff I like to see. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. The Institute for Justice is one of those organizations. I love them. I absolutely love them. The work they do. And it's not just that they're doing like the right cases. They're good. They're good attorneys. And I went to a retreat that they held in California last fall. And then I went and watched them argue a case in Michigan in front of the Michigan Supreme Court. And the attorney who argued that case, a young guy, did such a fabulous job. And I've seen other footage of them in court. They hire the best attorneys. They take the best cases. And they're doing it all because it's the right thing to do. And they are funded by donations from simply people who respect what they're doing. And so I tell you, if you can support them, please do. If you can't financially support them, bookmark their website and check it out. Just follow them to understand what they're doing because they're on these extremely important cases. Don't forget that Kilo, the little pink house case that they made a movie out of. The woman owns a house, and the city goes, "We're going to take your house and level it and sell it to a company that's going to put a factory here." She goes, "That's not right. You can take my property for private use?" And they said, "Yes, we can." That case went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Institute for Justice lawyers were the ones handling it on behalf of the homeowner. And they lost. They lost 5-4. That's how close that was. They lost 5-4. And I remember talking to them about it and said, you know, I didn't know them at the time, but I remember reading about the case and the fact that you guys lost was a heartbreaker. And they said, yeah, but you understand something. When that case got publicized, largely because of the work IJ was doing, that a whole host of states across America passed laws to make sure it could not happen there. A direct result of them taking the case to the Supreme Court, even though they lost. And they only lost 5-4. All it took was one justice to switch. They would have won. So it brought so much attention to that issue that in a roundabout way, it was a win. It was a win. But it's so just keep in mind that that's the kind of stuff they do. And it's a very good cause. Canadian Robot Lady says that she's got to get her next paint project lined up. Too much time on her hands. Dave Rogers says Andy Griffith had an episode where they put a car together in the courthouse. Did they? I don't think I saw that one. I haven't seen all the Andy Griffith shows. Andy Griffith is on right before I watched Beverly Hillbillies and Green Acres. Me TV. Oh, boy. Dirk Ramaswinkle, far off topic. What were your favorite cartoons as a kid? Oh, I loved all the Bugs Bunny and the Looney Tunes stuff. That was my favorite. I saw all of those many, many, many times. Big John, Drew and Mike forever. Drew and Mike, of course, were a long time morning show at WRIF in Detroit. They got replaced in an attempt, I think, to make the station sound a little younger. Tim Nossum checking in. Appreciate that very much. No comment or anything, just checking in. I appreciate that. Steam, I'm up north and I just saw the Boyne City Poker Race and Boat Show, watched from the beach, all the speedboats and cruisers. Have you been up near Petoskey a bit? Not in a little while. I brought my Viper up there a couple of years ago and I did a drive up through the trees north of Harbor Springs in that same general area. There's a really cool bookstore in Petoskey called McLean Eakin. I've done a bunch of book signings there. I love Petoskey. I love Harbor Springs. I love that whole corner of the state, even Traverse City up in that general direction. But Petoskey is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So thanks for checking in. I appreciate that. Gilbert says, send me your music and radio T-shirts and I'll make you a quilt. I appreciate the offer, but I still wear the T-shirts so they fit. I'm not sure if I've had any old school ones. I had a WABX shirt that I bought back in about 1979. I wish I had that shirt. A couple others that I don't have anymore. Somewhere along the line, I had a softball jersey from WABX. I was on the softball team as an intern, and it actually had my name on the back, Lehto. Long, long gone. Don't even know what became of it. Very, very sad. Josh Holman says Steve keeps breaking up. Is that true for anybody else? Steve says, hey, Steve, do you remember the Max Headroom incursion on local Chicago TV? Yes, I do. Not personally firsthand because I'm not in Chicago, but somebody somehow managed to put up a pirate TV signal that broke into the local broadcast of the TV station and basically overpowered its signal. And it was a clip of Max Headroom. And it was fairly short. And the FCC to this day has no clue exactly what happened or how it went down. It's one of those really strange things. I mean, they know that somebody was messing with somebody, but nobody really knows why. Chris George says, is it before or after Petticoat Junction? The weird thing is, I'm not a big fan of Petticoat Junction, but I love Green Acres. And I know that they're all kind of interrelated. Although some people might not recall, Green Acres was actually based on a radio program that came before it that was simply on the radio. And then this guy, Bear, I forgot his first name, Richard Bear, Bare, Richard Bear, came up with the idea of converting it to television. And of course, Green Acres became a phenomenon, but they've spun shows off of it and so on. So, Perishable Goods 13, Kimba the White Lion. And don't forget Speed Racer. Somehow seems to come into that same general time frame. But I'll tell you right now, every little kid who grew up in America from right around that time frame, Three Stooges and Gilligan's Island were like just played constantly. Like you come home from TV and there's always one station in Detroit is WKBD Channel 50. Was just Three Stooges and Gilligan's Island every single day, Monday through Friday. And I suspect the licensing fees were so inexpensive that they thought, oh, what the heck? And don't get me wrong, I think the Three Stooges are genius, absolutely genius. Gilligan's Island doesn't age that well for me, but the Three Stooges are just pure genius. And it's really sad that how those guys didn't make the money off those shows they should have, referring to the Stooges or Gilligan's Island, because nowadays with those kind of residuals, they all would have been trillionaires by the time they were done. MG Mustang 05 says MeTV just added a 24-hour cartoon channel. Yeah, I've seen ads for that. Mike Bennett says you can sue anyone. The question is, can you win? No, that's the problem. And the question is, if you get sued in a frivolous lawsuit, you can usually get it thrown out. Downside, of course, you got to pay your own attorney to do it. And courts could order the other side to pay your fees, but they are so hesitant to do that it kind of bums me out. So Pontiac 411 says Rin Tin Tin. It's before my time. The Burning Sensations, UHF, TV reruns. MH08, Zorro. Scott Summers used to get that Detroit TV station. Yeah, there was WKBD Channel 50, which stood for Kaiser Broadcasting, I believe. And then there was WXON Channel 20. And for years, XON had the hardest time surviving. And it's like, how do you have a hard time surviving when you've got a television license in a major market? But they always did. And then, of course, there's Channel 62, which was also kind of weak. And then somehow they came around, it became a Fox affiliate, or a CBS affiliate. Channel 2 went to Fox. Crazy. I'm not as up on the television markets as I was in the radio markets. The Prodigal Stranger, anyone else a Svengoolie fan? What's funny is there was, of course, Svengoolie, and he's now, of course, on you can find him in syndication. But there are always these imitators. And this happened in the old days in both radio and television, where there'd be something happening in one market and somebody would see it and go, I can go do that in another market and no difference. And then what happens is somewhere down the road, somebody from this market goes to that market and they go, hey, there's a guy here copying you. It happened in radio all the time. But also, Ghoul, the Ghoul from who was on the air in Detroit. I think he's from Ohio, though. There was a bunch of different people who were doing things like that, using variations on Ghoul, Svengoolie, Ghoulardi, whatever it is. And I'm not saying they're all ripping each other off. I'm just saying that a lot of people were unaware of the fact that there's several of them. Andy, New York 29, I think it's what NY stands for, says best Stooges episode ever was Disorder in the Court. And I would agree with you. I'd have to think for a bit. But that is a fabulous episode. And so there are some other good episodes, but that's a good one, especially because I'm, as an attorney, I've got to appreciate any show that says what life is like in a courtroom. Ron K, hello from one Finnish man to another. Thank you. I appreciate that. Question is, what's K stand for? Is a good Finnish name like Kivaranta or Kilpala? We'll find out. Gilbert Elvira. Hammond Eggers says Curly was the most naturally funny of the Stooges, but Shemp was a more skilled comic actor. It's interesting to hear the whole story about that because, they had a couple different people switch in and out. Most people, when they do like Three Stooge film festivals, they used to also advertise all Curlies, indicating that like you're not going to see any Shemps. You're going to see all Curlies. And then of course there's Curly Joe, and some of them didn't quite work. But Curly, I think, was the guy who was most likely, if you were just standing there talking to me, he could probably get you laughing faster than anybody else. But of course, my understanding is, and I could be wrong on this, but they say that a lot of times when he was making the noises and rubbing his face and doing circles on the floor, it's often because he'd forgotten his lines. And these shows were being shot in such a way that it wasn't like they're going to reshoot something 75 times just to get the intonation right. So the shows, for what they are brilliant. They're low budget. They're designed to be shown at the matinees, and people thought they're going to go away, and they wound up becoming timeless. I remember reading an article someplace about where in later years, a couple of them were invited to like Philadelphia or someplace to do an appearance in conjunction with something. And when they got to the train station, there's a huge crowd of people, and they're like, oh, I wonder who's here. There's a big crowd of people. Must be somebody important here. And it's like, no, we're here for you. What? He didn't quite understand how well they were loved. MHOA Svengoolie does live in Berwyn. It jumped on me again. Dan Boyd, my dad first saw television at the World's Fair in like 1938 or something. Yeah, this is one of those things to think about technology. You understand that if you owned a TV station, a TV station at the beginning of time of television, nobody's got TV sets. Oh, you buy a TV set. Okay, now you can watch one station. What are they playing? And so it takes a while for these things to gain traction. And the same is true with radio stations. When they first started broadcasting in the 1920s on these AM stations, nobody's listening. So people start buying radio sets. And I just recently read a book on the history of radio before the one about the history of radio in Cleveland. And they're talking about there were actually stores, I think Sears actually sold radio sets, receivers that were fixed. Like they'd only bring in one station, and it was set to bring in the station that they owned. Can you imagine that? Hong Kong Phooey. That rings a very faint bell. It's Trenton says, imagine the brains that exploded when people found out there was more than one Bozo the Clown. Yeah, Bozo the Clown was like a franchise. Jim Beam, Bill Kennedy at the movies. Oh, yeah. Bill Kennedy at the movies, of course. A lot of kids discovered him over the summertime, I believe, because he's on during the day. But, of course, you're sick, you're home from school, and Bill Kennedy at the movies would come on. And Bill Kennedy was just one of these guys who was perfect for the job that he had. He was a guy from Michigan, I believe, who worked in Hollywood for a little while, and he worked just enough to be on the sets of some famous people and make a little bit of money. And he's actually in some films. You can look him up. He's in some films. He moves back to Michigan and gets a job hosting the afternoon movie on a local TV station. And the movies are often older movies. They weren't always big blockbusters. And they're going, oh, today we're going to watch this movie. And he'd do a little introduction. And they do things like this now on other channels, but he'd do a little introduction. He'd tell you some background stuff, which nowadays, of course, with the internet and IMDb, you don't need. But back then, and he'd say, oh, yeah, this is directed by so-and-so who also directed this movie. And it's starring this person and this person. At one time, I worked with this one person on this other movie, blah, blah, blah. He's got little factoids. And then they start the movie. And then they would do a commercial break. And not every commercial break, but every couple of commercial breaks, he'd jump back in, throw in a few more tidbits. And then, at the end, he'd round it out by, roll the credits, and he'd tell some final closing things. And he was just such a friendly guy. I remember when he retired being saddened by it. And I remember in later years, I don't know if it was Bob Talbert or Neil Rubin, but one of the columnists in Detroit at the newspapers wrote an article mentioning that he was still around. He's in Florida. He just retired. And people were so like they were so overwhelmed to hear he's still around. Apparently that the columnist let him know that. He's like, oh, really? People remember me? It's like, yes, we remember you. We love you. We love you. I'm sure he's gone now, but he was such a great guy. And it was one of those things where there was another Rita Bell Rita Bell was a competitor briefly, maybe not briefly, but I think she's on maybe on a Channel 9 out of Canada, who did the same kind of thing, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. So, Jim, thanks for asking. I'd not thought about Bill Kennedy in a while. Randall Munson, Secret Squirrel. Terry, hello from the Twin Cities. New to your channel. Enjoy your videos. Bring back old memory of winning lemon law case in late 80s on my first new car of college, the Chevy Cavalier. Was that the GMX car? Those cars had issues. I actually know people who did lemon law before I got into law school because the law had been passed just a few years earlier, and there were a bunch of X car cases. So, Michigan Veterans Museum asking Curly, "Do you swear?" And he goes, "Sometimes." Burning Sensations is a song that calls out call letters to dozens of radio stations by Fishbone, Modern Industry. Is Fishbone who I'm thinking when the song Sell Out? Hang on. Don't make me. I'm having a mental blank now. Sell Out. I'm sorry, Real Big Fish. I knew it was Fish. Sorry. Taco Cat, were you able to listen to any French television in Detroit and Cleveland? We could get the Flintstones in French out of Montreal. Not television, but French radio. I remember down to the left end of the dial, there was Honey Radio, WHND, which was 560 AM. And someplace right near there was another signal. It may have been 570 or 580. That was an AM signal that was French. And I don't know where they're from, but of course, Detroit's right across the river from Windsor. But I don't think it was from Windsor, but I think it was simply an AM radio station that was broadcasting in French. So, but not on television. I don't recall that. David Zaradnansky says the Chevy X car was a Citation. Okay. Burning Sensations. Yeah, the other fish. Mindbend in Southgate down near Allen Park. I remember when Bowling for Dollars was filmed at a Thunder Bowl Lanes. I mentioned Bowling for Dollars recently in a video. I forgot what I was saying something, and the phrase blank for blank, and Bowling for Dollars jumped into my head. Talk about a low-key, low-budget game show. Bowling for Dollars, but John Wall says Rita Bell would always promote going to Key Punch School for a career. Really? I mean, was it like an advertiser of hers or something? Victor Jason, you still listen to the radio? Almost never. I've got a Sirius satellite receiver in my vehicle. I listen to that occasionally. I bounce around, but the last few times I've been in a car that only had an AM and an FM. If I put it on the FM and I scan, within 5 minutes I shut it off. I just can't. I just can't stand it. Just can't deal with it. MH08 says used to listen to CJBC 860 AM from Toronto in French, 860 AM. Dick Ramaswinkle says, Steve, you are not a real attorney until you lose a case you should have won and won a case you should have lost. I guess so. we hate to think that we go out there and lose cases we should have won. In my mind, every case I've ever had that didn't go well, I thought, boy, that should have gone better. But a real loss, you settle cases. 99% of all cases settle. So you can't count settlements as wins or losses in that sense. I think they're wins if my client was happy with a settlement, but I don't count them that way. So I've had a couple cases, but unfortunately, talking about them ticks me off too much. So someday I might actually do a couple of videos and things like that. Henry Nissanen says, ever so slightly, I want to buy a Michigan lemon solely to have Steve represent my case. The problem is you don't know they're lemons till after you bought them, and usually you're so upset that you don't want to deal with it. Randall Munson says the Oldsmobile Quad 4. I had a few of those cases in my office. As I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, there was something wrong with the engine such that if you're in an environment that got really, really cold, like Michigan in the wintertime, you could get a situation where there'd be some kind of buildup of water, moisture that would get into the crankcase somehow, and the crankcase shouldn't have water in it. So I seem to recall having a bunch of cases involving engine failure with the quad fours a long time ago. But of course, that's a long time ago. Dan Boyd says I picked up CKLW a few times from Dayton, Ohio in the 1970s. That's not that unbelievable. CKLW at one point in time was the number one radio station in Detroit. I believe also Flint and Toledo at the same time. It was a huge, huge signal. Played great music, and they're a trendsetter. Many people who work in radio, disc jockeys, or people who study radio and talk about what's good radio, if you said name the greatest music station of all time, CKLW would be at the top of that list or in the top three on almost any list, just because they're programmed so well. And being on that signal they were listened to everywhere. And they actually became quite influential. If CKLW added a song to their playlist, other stations would just add it as a matter of course. They're playing it, we'll play it. And so when you're that big of a trend setter, it's a pretty good deal. Josh Holman says citations were X cars, Cavaliers were J cars. Yeah, I'm just the X car reference was there's a bunch of problems with the X cars. So Stephen Cook, see you in the funny papers. Bye. Oh boy. Dizzy Izzy says KSHE, KSHE, a very, very well-known station at one point in time was owned by Century Broadcasting, the same company that owned WABX in Detroit, one of the early freeform FM stations. And one of my favorite connections I'm going to draw here is Michael Stanley, who was from Ohio, and he had a band called the Michael Stanley Band. Had a really, really cool song called Rosewood Bitters, which was also covered by Joe Walsh, one of his friends. And if you go on the YouTube, you can find a KSHE reference where Michael Stanley and his band are about to play the song Rosewood Bitters live, someplace down in the area where KSHE is. And he said, oh, by the way, we've got to thank KSHE because they played this song. And the crowd goes nuts. And so they were on top of it playing that song. So Burning Sensations, have you had any CVT lemon cases, the constant velocity transmission? I'm not sure off the top of my head. I probably have, but nothing sticks out. WXRK. There's a lot of cool radio stations out there. But like I said, the ones that are up there where people from different generations will agree, CKLW is up there. Dizzy Izzy says, great song. Referring to Rosewood Bitters, I hope. From a guy who doesn't drink, you have to understand how important that song is. Michael Stanley passed away last year. I knew he passed away recently. I couldn't quite keep dates like that nowadays. But he actually, it's interesting. Besides being a prolific musician and huge, by the way, huge in Ohio, in the Midwest, he worked in the media and worked at radio stations as a disc jockey. I think he also worked on television as a reporter. And he's one of these guys who's just multi-talented. But, I have a soft spot in my heart for anybody who can write music that I can remember, and that I remember it to the point where I feel like if I didn't know this song, it would hurt me. Okay. And that's one of those songs where I remember the first time I heard it, I'm like, I can't believe I've never heard the song before. And then I remember I went and listened to his version. I'm like, oh my gosh, I like this version too. So I heard Joe Walsh's version first. So I've got to mention, by the way, I forgot to mention this. Last week I went to Pine Knob here in Michigan and saw Third Eye Blind last weekend, and saw them. The warm-up group was Yellow Card, and prior to that was a warm-up group called Arizona, who of course are from New Jersey. And Third Eye Blind, I'd seen them once back in the late '90s. Huge radio airplay band, and of course not as big now as they were back then. But they put on a great show, had a great time. Perfect evening for summer at a show at Pine Knob. It was in the '80s as the sun was setting, and people up on the hill. But of course, I'm in the seats. I won't do the hill. I won't do the hill. And saw great show. So that was I think my 8th show of this year. So that was a good time. Like I said, Yellow Card, I'd never heard of them before. Turns out they were huge also. It's not in my circles. They were on TRL a lot. Total Request Live on MTV. I'm like, oh, okay, that explains it. Didn't spend a lot of time watching that. Jerry Bell, Lemon Law cases, have they gone up or down in quality over the years? They stay the same. Literally, there's no more, no less. It just happens that, different kinds of cars from time to time. So, Pimp Daddy Quill, good morning, Steve from Cooley Dam, Washington. Thank you for checking in. Charles Seal, Steve, do you play any instruments? No, I have no musical talent whatsoever. I've got a couple brothers who are musicians. One of my brothers is playing in a band regularly at bars and festivals and so on. I love music. I love to watch music. I love to listen to music, but I am not the kind of person who can play anything at all. I'm mesmerized by people who can. But Old Jarhead, does Pine Knob still fill up with weed smoke? We used to joke about places smelling like Pine Knob. And that's a reference to the fact that it's an outdoor venue. There's a stage, and it's built into a hill. So the stage is facing seats that go up like this, and then a hill. And it works really well for sound control. And at the time they built it, it was out in the middle of nowhere. Now there's subdivisions all around it and stuff. But so there's also a roof over the seats. So there's a roof and it's bowl shape. And on calm summer nights, especially when, I don't know, the Allman Brothers, if you were up on the hill, you'd be looking down into what looked like a bowl of smoke or soup. And it was just so many people smoking the weed. And of course, nowadays it's more common, but they don't allow people to smoke. You're not supposed to smoke, but people still do smoke. And so you'll see somebody smoking, and then one of the rangers from Pine Knob would walk by and say, "Excuse me, you can't do that. You got to go out there and smoke." And the person would stop for 5 minutes, and then they'd smoke again. So that's what's going on. MXTB 1888. Did you ever visit Boblo Island? Of course. You couldn't grow up in southeastern Michigan without going to Boblo Island. Boblo Island is an amusement park on an island in the Detroit River, technically on the Canadian side of the border. And you get on this really cool double-decker boat and drift down there, and then get on the island and come back on the same boat. And so you were trapped there for the day, but you didn't care if you're a little kid. And I know that a lot of schools had field trips where at the end of the year, the big payoff was Boblo Island. And went there a bunch of times with family and friends, but went there a bunch of times with school outings. And it's often like 5th grade, 6th grade kind of thing. And, their roller coaster, the Wild Mouse, was not exactly something that you'd have today, like, Steel Vengeance or something. But it was just a run-of-the-mill, typical amusement park, but it was on this island, and the boat trip is what made it so cool. And I loved Boblo Island, absolutely loved it. So, Timothy White, I went with my mom to Boblo as a kid. Never went there with my parents. Went there with my friend's parents. One of my friends' dad said, "Hey, let's all go to Boblo Island." So we all piled in the station wagon and went down there. Tiger Man 99515. Did I miss anything? Had to run wife out on errand. She broke her collarbone. Oh wow, that would hurt. Sorry to hear that, but no, you missed nothing. Zero. Oh, old Jar had to do a school trip there in the mid 70s. Oh, Tim Nossum, didn't they sell the Bobble boats? Yeah, they did, and they sold the island too. So the company that ran it said we can't make money doing this anymore. And I believe they sold the island to somebody who was going to try to revive it as an amusement park, and they realized they couldn't do that. So then they sold it to an investor who said he's going to build, I think, condos on it and like a marina. And then the boats got sold in essence for scrap. There's even a documentary about it. There was two of them. And I believe one of them may have been scrapped already, but there was a huge move trying to save the other one. And a guy who listens to my show or watches my videos, it's not within reaching distance, sent me a pen that was made out of the wood from the dance floor on the boat. So, yeah, Gilbert says there used to be an amusement park at Walled Lake. Yes, there was back in the old days. I remember hearing about that. It's long gone now. Mindbend says one of the boats was destroyed by fire. The other is being restored. And I think there's a big issue about how much it's going to cost because, you know, restoring a boat like that would cost a fortune. You want to keep it seaworthy. Then what are you going to do with it? Cyberdoc, the Wild Mouse was a single car ride. Yes, but it was kind of like a roller coaster in that it went up and around like that. And I remember at the time going, this is crazy. And then years later going, wait, that wasn't that big of a deal. William Page has good attitude about running a marathon. You know, I learned a long time ago because I started running back in the mid 80s. I ran more 10Ks than you could even think about. And you realize very early on, you ain't going to win. Okay. There's always going to be somebody who's going to win. You ain't going to win. So dial it down. Now what? Okay. I'm going to go have a good time. There you go. I'm running with a bunch of nice people, having a good time. Depending on the length of the race, you know, I was running a race a couple years ago, it was a half marathon, and I saw somebody who had in the back of their shirt, rest in peace, person's name and dates on it. And they had a shirt custom made with that. So I ran up to them, was pacing them, and I said, excuse me, but could I ask you about your shirt? And she goes, yeah. I go, tell me about him. And she told me the whole story about, I believe it was her brother who passed away and what he had done and how important he was. And we talked for about a mile or two and it was great, you know? And so you don't know who you're going to meet or the experience you're going to have, but you go there, you have a good time. There you go. So it's good. Vile Flies' old dance floor and bowling alley wood is definitely sought after. Yeah. Cyberdoc says, Steve, the Wild Mouse is scary because it always felt like something was going to break and the coaster would derail. I also seem to recall that occasionally it would go around corners kind of shifty. Freetime Offshore says Flint Park Lake had an amusement park. There were actually a couple amusement parks in Flint. I remember talking about this back when I had a talk show in Flint. I mentioned amusement parks because they were much more common in the old days. They were smaller and would often draw people locally. And somebody said, yeah, there used to be a park in Flint. And I said, where is it? And they go, well, it's down at the end of a road called Flint Park Road. I'm like, that makes it easy. But there were a couple of different amusement parks, I believe. But I am McNathan's Edgewater Park was on 7 Mile Road east of Telegraph in Detroit. That's another one I've heard of. There's also an amusement park on the Detroit River across from Belle Isle, but on the Detroit side, right, I think north of where the bridge is now. So Idris Taylor, was there ever a development in the Marathon Jelly Bean Man? No, there was not. I actually Don't know, and I didn't run the full marathon last year. I ran the half, so I didn't get to see whether he was still out. I should look him up. But for those of you who don't know, if you run the Free Press Marathon, you run through all kinds of different neighborhoods. And for the bulk of it, you're usually running the same neighborhoods year after year. Some parts never change. And so you run all the way out past the Elmwood Cemetery into Indian Village, and you go up 3 blocks, across and back 4 blocks, and come back out on Jefferson. And when you go through this Indian Village neighborhood, you go past the same houses you went past last year. And there's a guy who stands in front of his house just handing out Dixie cups filled with jelly beans. And when you are running and you've got 18, 19 miles under your belt, you are so tired, exhausted, different words, dehydrated, hungry, name every deficit you could have, including intellectual. You've got them. Your body is doing everything it can to keep you moving, but all this other stuff's going. So one of the things that you can actually eat that taste really good are jelly beans. And I remember the first time I was running along this way, and this guy's just handing out jelly beans. Other people are handing out. There's people handing out beer a block back. Okay, but I don't ingest alcohol when I'm exercising. And the guy's handing out jelly beans. I go, thank you very much. And I remember eating these things, going, that was so good. And the next year, as I'm going into Indian Village, my first thought is, I wonder if the guy will be there with the jelly beans. And he was there. And so I actually stopped and I said, sir, I want to thank you. My name is Steve, but I get these every year, and I always anticipate this. He goes, oh, thank you very much. And he was there every single year. And then one year he was not. And I was so bummed. I never found out if he's okay. He just missed it, what was going on. But that was Mr. Jellybean. And he was the guy in the Indian Village thing. So Canadian Robot Lady says, I thought it was jujubes. Jujubes, the ones that are hard to chew. I'm not sure how good they do if you're running trying to chew on those. David Faith says, here's a tip. When your wife asks what's on TV, don't say dust. Jerry C., you did a good job with the video on the federal law related to harming federal officials without going down that huge rabbit hole. Thank you. By the way, one of the problems I had was that people go, Steve, everyone knows murder is wrong. Did you really need to do a video on this? Yeah, murder is a state crime. This is a federal crime, or an attempted federal crime. Okay? I guess it is a federal crime. It's just the perpetrator is dead. But the notion that there is a federal statute on it is what was important. I tried to explain that, but some people just saw the headline and go, oh, duh. In fact, one of the first comments was, duh. D-U-H, duh. Concert, LD, been watching your videos for a couple of years and just now able to catch a live stream. Thank you. I appreciate that. Carl's Corner says you should find out what happened to him. I will. I've got to ask around. I just had forgotten all about it. Vile Fly says the Chevron deference will let individuals challenge the EPA and hot rods with better emissions in their production year. The Chevron deference, and I'm not going to get too heavily into it now because it's getting near the end of this video. And what's basically going to happen is a lot of stuff that was handled administratively is now going to wind up in courts. And I suspect that some of the lower courts will be very, very upset at how much stuff they've got to handle now, where people will be challenging everything because of this. But David Faith, my biggest fear about becoming a zombie after the apocalypse is all that walking. Yeah, and it sounds like they're hungry all the time, too. Janice Ellery, a small park in New Hampshire called Santa's Village. It's still there. I went there as a kid 50 years ago. That's cool. There's a town in Michigan called Christmas. I mentioned that before. But Cyberdoc, so you stopped by and picked up the jujubes before or after the phone call. A Seinfeld reference. Steve Keller, did you ever go to a drive-in movie theater? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a drive-in movie theater called the Troy Drive-In that was right at 14 Mile and where I-75 is. It was there too, but I'm saying right near there. Although there's been a bunch of different stuff there. And I saw, I'm trying to think what movies I can remember seeing there. 2001 Space Odyssey, saw that there. And then there was a drive-in. Gilbert would be able to help me out on this. A drive-in over in the West Bloomfield area, where I saw Kentucky Fried Movie. Oh, some other stuff. And then there was another drive-in out towards Gratiot. May have been the Gratiot Drive. I'm not sure. There's still some drive-ins around, but only 5 or 6 now. Haven't been to one in a long time. But yeah. Remember the drive movie theaters? And I remember back in the day when you had to put the little speaker in your window of your car. And when I was in Bad Axe, I knew the family that owned the drive-in movie theater in Bad Axe, which is now long gone. And they had me record music that they could play in between movies. And they had me record public service announcements. I'd kill for them right now, because I recorded one where I would actually say that, don't forget that we've got, refreshments at the stand. Next movie's gonna start in a few minutes. And by the way, when you pull out, remove the speaker from your window. And they told me that it didn't happen every night, but it happened often enough where they wanted me to remind people, because otherwise, if you start backing up, that clip on the back of it would bend and break your window out, which wouldn't be funny. Well, not to you, to other people, yes. Joshua Clark says Christmas, Michigan is in the UP. Yes, it is. It's along the coast of Lake Superior up there. Georgiana Thornton, I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I'll be 75 tomorrow. You mean 75 years old as an age? Congratulations. Happy birthday. People have been checking with the temperature. That maybe you were saying it'll be 75 tomorrow. But that'd be cool, I think, for Texas this time of year, right? Timothy White used to be one in Wayne, Michigan. Now I live by the one in Dearborn. There's a couple big ones down that way. And I'm trying to remember if Dearborn is the big one I'm thinking of. But I mean, drive-in movie theaters are huge. I mean, there were a lot of them for a while. Gilbert, yeah, Haggerty and Commerce Drive-In next to the gas station. You may have been working there when I went to drive and saw Kentucky Fried Movie. David Peterson, Catholic high school girls in trouble. Yeah, that was one of the little jokes in there. Oh boy. Valerie Ann says, I think the Warwick Drive-In is the only one left, and that's actually in New York State on the border, though. Yeah, I think in Michigan there's 6 or 7 left. I actually talked to a guy recently who was looking at the concept of buying a drive-in movie theater. And he said, I think it'd be fun to buy, but it wasn't nearby. He'd have to probably handle it remotely. Now, of course, Cyberdoc points out, you tune your radio to a certain frequency because they simply can broadcast the soundtrack over a local open band on the radio. And they can do that. The Condo in Redondo says, did you ever have an injury to your right shoulder? I've noticed that during your videos, your right shoulder is not square to your left. I only laugh because I've done entire videos on all the diagnoses I get, and I routinely get people diagnosing me as having scoliosis or some kind of other injury. But no, I've broken a bunch of bones in my body, which are all between here and here. I broke that bone, I broke my wrist, and I broke my arm. That's it. But no, I haven't. But thank you for asking. I appreciate that. The Condo in Redondo. Last week, I had somebody call me fat. I had a guy actually go, but Steve, you're fat. You're putting on weight. You're fat. Now, that's not a diagnosis. I think that was an attempt at an insult. And, I have a scale. I know how much I weigh. So, John Zablak, you don't forget to visit the refreshment stand. Went to the movies the other day. What movie did I see? I'm trying to remember. Must not have made that big of an impression on me. And all I know is that if you'd told me I'd be spending that much money on popcorn and soda, I never would have believed you. But I remember hearing a guy in the movie industry say, you do understand that movie theaters are basically refreshment stores that show movies. Like the money is made when they sell you a garbage can sized thing of popcorn for $19 or whatever it is. So, oh boy. William Jarvis, enjoy your videos. Thank you. Cyberdoc will gladly take the food over the booze any day. Timothy White maybe meant fat P-H-A-T. Yeah, that could be. That could be, although he spelled it F-A-T. The prodigal stranger, let's all go to the lobby and grab ourselves a snack. And I seem to recall that was kind of sung. And you'd often have like cartoon characters, like a garbage can, like, and don't forget to throw out your garbage, that kind of thing. Dirk Ramaswinkle says, by far, you pump out the very best content on YouTube. Just wish you had time to do more videos. Pump out the volume. Pump up the volume. It's like, yeah, you shovel out the best content. No, thank you. I appreciate that. Vilefly says, more money be made serving beer at theaters. I've seen theaters that serve alcohol, and I've also heard of movie houses that really push the alcohol, but for some odd reason, there's not quite a connection there. I don't know it's because of the fact that movies so often require the attendance of children to make money. I don't know if that's it or not. I don't know. RR says fat can be an acronym for fit and trim. Mitch A checking from Potterville, famous for train derailments and chicken gizzards. Is that really a thing out there? Chicken gizzards? Bob Blah Blah says, great show. Thank you for checking, my friend. Bob Blah Blah checking in from his edge of Ohio. Good friend of mine. Davenport 1A, as I recall, says that wooden chair looks comfy. It's more comfortable than you think it is, but it's okay. MD MELA Strange could be Dr. Mela Strange, or could be Dr. Malastrange. Could be all kinds of things. Only time I went to a drive-in was to see Star Wars. Yeah, I remember when Star Wars came out. I did not see that at the drive-in, but it was right around that era. Yeah. Dara says, thanks to entertainment, I come here for Steve's content and stay to the end for Canadian Robot Lady outros. Which is ironic if you think about how much time I spend talking, how much time she spends talking. There's 8 seconds or something at the front and 10 to 12 at the end. So she puts in 30 seconds of talking. I put in this big chunk in the middle. People are like, yeah, but what about the Canadian Robot Lady? Well, what did she say? Gilbert had a theater in Canton, Michigan that did dinner and drinks. Really? Okay. Cyberdoc's Bar Harbor, Maine has a Real Pizza, which is a theater with lounge chairs, sofas, and food. And of course, there's a pun there with real, as an R-E-E-L. That's a cool idea. David Faith says, dear life, when I said, can my day get any worse? It was rhetorical, not a challenge. Rain of Bastet says, you've a great fan base, or you got great fans. It's one of the reasons I tune in. Well, I appreciate that. And here's the thing. Right now we've got about 475 people in the room, according to my math. And these get up to be 500, 600, 700. And that's, if you think about it, that's such a small fraction of the people who watch my videos, and even fewer who comment here. But we always have such fun doing these conversations. And I've had people ask me who don't, I got friends and family who don't watch my YouTube channel. They go, you have a what now? I have a YouTube channel. What's that? I make videos. Oh, yeah, I've heard you mention it. What are they about? I don't know, stuff in the news. Do people watch those? A few, yeah. Really? Okay. But I tell people that the live streams remind me of doing talk radio. But talk radio, people would call in. I'd spend 5 minutes on a topic and then hang up, do a commercial break, come back, and take another call. And so the topics were usually a little bit more vetted and detailed and fleshed out. And here, I can look at a comment, make a comment, and go to right the next one, or spend time on one, or we can have a discussion about something, we've spent time discussing something for a little while before. So, Mad Hatter it jumped on me again. Mad Hatter says his mom was excited because she got the book. You recall that last week he mentioned that he had sent me a note and I responded right away. And I helped replace a book that I think got lost or something like that. Oh, Johnny Bravo, and we're going to end on this because it's 3 o'clock where I am and I've been on the air for 2 hours. Johnny Bravo says, did anybody mention putting friends in the trunk of the car and going to the drive-in? Nobody mentioned that, but of course, that was the deal. If they charged by person, by body. Some places later just said, well, carload of people. We don't care so much per car. But I also know people who would sneak in alcohol because some drive-in theaters would actually frown on you bringing in any of your own stuff, let alone alcohol if you're underage. And so I remember, people telling me that they went to a drive-in and at the entry, they made them pop the trunk. And it was partly to look for other people. And you'd also be looking for contraband. Johnny Knoxville says, Steve, you don't really run road races to win. You run them to PR each time you race. Dude, personal records of mine were set back in 1989. Okay. I ran a 3:41 marathon one time, and I ran a 1:37 half marathon. I will never see times like that again. Never. Okay. So there are people who run to win, the pros. There are people who run for PRs, which is a select group of people. And there's people who run just to survive and have fun. And that's me. But I appreciate the thought, and you are absolutely correct. That is something. So CyberDoc says this chat is hilarious and quick-witted. I agree with you, as does NP Diddy. NP Diddy. And Roadrunner calls out, do people watch those? You tell people numbers and they don't know what it means. I go, I have 500,000 subscribers. And they go, well, don't the Kardashians have like 100 million subscribers? Yeah, but what are you going to do? So there you go. It's past 3 o'clock. I will see you guys, as always, next Sunday, 1 till 3 Eastern time. And as always, on my main channel, 10 o'clock, Monday through Fridays. And if you get bored and you got more time on your hands, check out Steve Lehto Vault. I put up a lot of stuff there. A lot of times it's me talking, whatever. Stuff that doesn't fit in the main channel goes on the Vault. Otherwise, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.